Hey everyone, thank you for joining me today for episode 701 of People Behind the Science. I'm your host, Dr. Marie McNeely, and today I am joined by our guest, Dr. Germán Ferrero Medina, to talk about life and science. So listeners, I hope you enjoy learning more about the life and career of another researcher in today's episode. And if you want to meet even more great people in science, you can check out our website at peoplebehindthescience.com to peruse previous episodes and show notes. And today, Germán is going to tell us more about his life, career, and research. So get ready to meet another one of our fantastic people behind the science after this short sponsor message.
Are you looking for an antibody to a difficult antigen? Lampire is here to help. With over 3 decades of experience, we are your go-to source for antibody development. To begin your free of charge consultation, email lampire@lampire.com or call 215-795-2838.
Every day, discoveries are made that will change our understanding of the world around us. Dr. Marie McNeely is here to bring you the brilliant minds who are making these discoveries so they can share their incredible stories and take you on an amazing journey. Welcome to People Behind the Science.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to People Behind the Science. Today, I am excited to be speaking with our guest, Dr. Germán Ferrero Medina. So, Germán, welcome to our show today. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. We are so excited to have you with us today, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you and your wonderful work. But before we get into the details, let me first start by telling our listeners a little bit more about who you are and how you got to where you are today. So, listeners, Germán is the Science and Conservation Director at the Wildlife Conservation Society Colombia. He also coordinates the projects for the conservation of freshwater turtles and tortoises in the Amazon Orinoco region. Germán is a member of the National Academy of Sciences. He completed his undergraduate training in biology at the Universidad Nacional de Colombia. He received his master's degree in ecology from the Universidad Federal do Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and he was awarded his PhD in ecology and conservation from Duke University in North Carolina. And today, Germán, we're excited to get to know you both as a scientist, but also as a person. So can you start by telling us what you like to do when you're not doing science?
Well, I'm a family man. I love to travel with my family. I'm a father of twin boys. So I keep myself busy. We like to travel. We're always looking for new rivers and waterfalls and exploring outdoors. So that's one of the things I like to do the most. I also like sports. I play some basketball with my friends during the weekends. But yeah, mostly when I'm not doing science, I spend time with my family, with my wife and kids.
Oh, wonderful. Now, are the kids playing basketball with you yet?
No, they like different sports. One of them likes soccer and the other one plays water polo.
Oh, wow.
But I do travel with them for the practices and sometimes they have tournaments. So yeah, I'm traveling with them all the time, accompanying them and supporting them in their sports, but not basketball there.
That's fair. Everyone's got their own sport in the family. I like it. Well, Germán, it sounds like you keep busy outside of science with your family with some of these hobbies, but I'd love to talk about your scientific side as well, because you are doing some amazing work in research and conservation. So how do you describe what you do to someone who's not familiar with your specific field or maybe not in science at all?
I would say that a summary could be that what we study the way animals live in nature, the problems that they're facing for their survivorship, but mostly we work with people, local communities, and people around the country and Latin America to find solutions to these environmental problems that are affecting both the species that we work for and indirectly or directly those people that live in the same territories.
Absolutely. And I think that really highlights kind of all of these different aspects of the work that you do. It's not just the science. It is working with these communities and understanding the dynamics of everything that's playing into this big, complicated system.
Yes, exactly. A part of it is in the scientific portion of understanding the abundance of species and how they live. But the pure work of conservation involves working with people and local communities and working along them to find solutions that benefit both the people and those species or those ecosystems that we want to protect. So yeah, it's very collaborative and participative with the local people.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of motivation to protect and preserve these wonderful species and these wonderful environments as well. So that can be inspiring or motivating for scientists in and of themselves. But do you have a favorite quote or a saying or something that just comes to mind for you, Germán, that really motivates and inspires you?
I'm not sure if it's a quote, but I have this sociologist, journalist that is he's Colombian. I like him a lot. He died a few years ago, but he said in one of his books that history is not about what happens to great people and heroes, but history is about what happens to everyday people in their everyday life across our country. He was referring to across our country, people who live next to the rivers, next to the wetlands, next to the mangroves, in the forest, referring to these people. And I really like this because I think it's motivational in the sense that I care a lot about learning about these people's stories, how they live in these different places, in these different regions from my country and from Latin America, and how they relate to their natural environment, how they have been doing this for many years. And like I was saying, how we together can find solutions to the challenges that they're facing now. So I really like this, not necessarily a quote, but this idea that I read in one of his books. His name is Alfredo Molano, and he's a sociologist. And I always have this on my mind when I'm traveling and when I'm working and when I'm traveling around my country.
Oh, absolutely. And I really like that it emphasizes that we're all a part of history and we're kind of writing this story every day, which I think is amazing.
Exactly.
So, Germán, you mentioned this particular reporter who you were interested in. And I think there's a lot of people that scientists can look up to, whether they're in the field of conservation, in your own specific research area or work area, or kind of these big historical figures that come to mind when people envision scientists, or even just the mentors that you interact with every day. So do you have people who may have served as role models or who you really looked up to throughout your career?
Oh my God, yeah. As scientists, and I think every profession grows like having role models and learning a lot from other people. Like our professions are built by working and learning from other people. So definitely there's several people that I admire, many scientists whose ideas I admire, but I would say that a person that was very influential in my career was one of my first advisors, one of my first mentors when I was an undergrad. Her name is Olga Castaño. She was a researcher at my university here in Colombia. And she's always been a role model to me because she taught me many things besides science. Like I was starting to become a scientist, but she taught me about the importance of being good people above being good scientists, the importance of being a human being, the importance of respecting my peers, the importance of respecting the ideas of the people that I would listen when I was traveling and starting to do field work. Many things. She was a very humble scientist. She would always recognize the things that she knew and the things that she didn't know. So we're always looking for help from other professors whenever we were facing challenges that she couldn't help me with. So these kind of things taught me a lot. And I've always kept that in my mind of the importance of being that type of person, not only of being a great scientist and having great ideas, but always of being that kind of person that can relate to everyone and respects everyone. That was very important to me. And I think she has been one of my main role models along my career.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned in talking about your mentor that you were already starting to become a scientist by this point when you were in undergraduate. So can you maybe rewind back even further, Germán, and take us all the way back to the beginning? Where did you first start getting interested in science? And maybe what were some of these key points along your career path that really helped you find your way to where you are today?
I've always loved outdoors. Since I was a little kid, I would travel with my family. My grandmother used to have a farm. And we would go there and we'd play by the river. And I was always like catching frogs and not like in a very scientific way. I can't say like I wrote my first paper when I was 12.
Right.
I wish I could say that. But no, it was just more like in a familiar way of enjoying nature and enjoying being in the outdoors. Always loved to be close to wildlife. That was something that was always inside me. And then when I was about to start my undergrad, I realized that biology was that career that could allow me to learn more things and to study wildlife and to be close to wildlife in the way that I had liked since I was a kid. So thankfully, I was lucky to get into the Colombia's National University. It's the public university in Colombia, one of the best. It's very hard to get in. And I started a career in biology. I grew up in Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia. It's a large city. But this university is very special because it has campuses all across the country and people from different parts of the country study here in this university. So that allowed me to have friends from different regions. We started traveling early in the career and we started learning about the different ecosystems in the country and all the species and all the bird species and primates. So I was really amazed because I already liked nature, but I hadn't traveled enough. But when I started traveling my country, and of course, Colombia is a hyper diverse country. You just travel a few hours from Bogota and you're in places with enormous amounts of different birds and orchids and plants. So I was just amazed by this biodiversity. And I just realized that that's what really I wanted to dedicate my life to study the biodiversity of my country, but also to help preserve it, to dedicate my life to long-term projects where I could spend many years really understanding the problems a species or an ecosystem face, but also trying to solve the challenges. So I realized early in my career that I was in the right place and I wanted to be a scientist. And then I was a very good student when I was an undergrad. I had a scholarship. And when I finished my undergrad, I received a scholarship to study in Brazil. And then I received another scholarship to study in the US and do my PhD. So that's kind of how my career started developing, from loving nature and having this passion to actually starting to ask particular questions about the biodiversity in Colombia and how to solve those problems.
Oh, that is wonderful. And you were very casual just describing how your academic training took you to all these different places. You mentioned you did your undergraduate degree not too far from home there in Colombia. But then for your master's degree, you were in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And then for your PhD, you came all the way to the United States to go to Duke University. What was it like going to all these completely different countries and sort of different environments to be doing research for your academic training?
Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. I think it's one of the things that I love most about my academic career and a career in biology and science is exactly that, to be able to go to different places and have the opportunity to share both at a personal and an academic level experiences with all these people. It was amazing. I think it's something that perhaps one of the things that I value the most of my career. It was awesome to move from Colombia to Brazil, a country that I always looked up to. In South America, Brazil is the largest country and has a lot of biodiversity. And the Amazon portion of Brazil is huge, but you also have the Atlantic forest and the Cerrado, so many ecosystems that were so different from what I was used to here in Colombia. So it was incredible to have the opportunity to go there and learn with different professors, visit all these different ecosystems. It was challenging, obviously, at first because of the language. I had to learn Portuguese to live by myself as a student on a scholarship, but that's part of growing as a person and growing as a professional. So it was challenging, but it was wonderful. It was an amazing experience. And then moving to US was also wonderful because it was also a different school, different ideas, different professors, different way of teaching, which I loved because it was challenging. Every time I moved from one place to another one, it was like a different academic challenge. But it was all about learning and filling myself with all these ideas from all different professors. When I went to US, I went because I wanted to work with Stuart Pym and John Turberg, who are two scientists that I admire a lot. And when I was in Brazil, I wrote to them about, I have these ideas. I would love to go to Duke and study with you guys. And John was already retired, so my advisor was Stuart, but I had the privilege of working one of my field studies with John. So at the end, I feel like I've been very lucky and very blessed because I've been able to do many of the things that I dreamed about doing, working with these incredible scientists, visiting these incredible universities, and experiencing learning in different countries. It was an incredible personal and professional experience.
Absolutely. So then how did you ultimately get connected to the Wildlife Conservation Society and make your way back to Colombia?
When I was about to finish my PhD, I was on a Fulbright scholarship, so I had to come back to Colombia, but I was also very much looking forward to returning because I've always had projects here and I have a lot of ideas of things that I wanted to do. And WCS Colombia at that time didn't have a science director. It was a smaller organization or a smaller program here in Colombia, and they were looking to expand the program, increase their staff, and increase their impact in Colombia. So they were looking for somebody that was from Colombia and that had this academic background that could help lead the team to start developing new projects for wildlife conservation in different parts of the country. So I started writing to different organizations here in Colombia. I was also applying to some universities, some of which I actually was accepted as a professor. But the WCS invited me to work as science director and to lead the technical team and to expand the program. So it was a great challenge. I thought it was going to be a good suit for me because it required certain academic expertise, but also some experience with on-the-ground conservation. I was going to have the opportunity of developing new conservation programs in different parts of Colombia. So it was like it was like awesome for me because that's what I wanted to do. That's what I had been doing at a much smaller scale. I already had small conservation programs with small grants, but this was the opportunity of belonging to a group and to helping lead a group and expand a group of professionals to doing such wonderful things in my country. So I decided to come here to WCS, and I've been here since. And I think it was a great decision because I've been able to do many things that I enjoy.
Absolutely. And you've been doing amazing work there at WCS and have some really cool projects. So is there a project right now, Germán, that you're working on, or maybe one that you worked on recently that you were just the most excited about?
Oh, yes. There's always these new projects that get us very excited. Right now, we have a project that we share with the Brazil and the Bolivia program, and it's related to the giant South American river turtle. It's the largest river turtle in South America. And a few years ago, we did a workshop in Brazil to gather people to discuss the future of these species, the best conservation practices. And we asked people to bring information about the number of nesting females that they were protecting in each of their conservation sites. And at that workshop, somebody came from the border of Bolivia and Brazil, and they said that they were working a site that had over 35,000 nesting females, which usually the largest other populations were like 6,000, 8,000 in Brazil. But average, you could say all the places were having like 2,000 to 3,000 nesting females. So when we heard about this, it was like, wow, is this for real? Is this place for real? We have to go check it out. And what are you guys doing there? How are you preserving these species to reach these incredible numbers? So a few years ago, we found some funds and we went there and we started working with the people there. There is a local NGO called Eco Valley that has been doing amazing work protecting the species for 20 years. From the Brazilian side and from the Bolivian side, there is a community that has been also trying to protect the species in a way that we're still trying to understand the origin of this population. It's probably related to the protection that the community has given to this population. But right now, we started helping them with the conservation program for the species, but also we started helping them to estimate the abundance of the species because there are so many turtles nesting in these beaches that it's really hard to count them because they will come out at night to nest in these sandy beaches of the river. And there are so many of them that the beach is covered in black and you can hear the carapaces bumping into each other and you just see sand flying all around the beach from the turtles digging their nest.
Oh, wow.
So it's an incredible sight. We've been discussing this with many colleagues and we believe this is a nature spectacle. Those spectacles that people like to go and see, the migration of the Serengeti or the migration of the monarch butterflies or the stingrays that migrate together, hundreds of individuals together. So that's what is occurring here in Guaporé, in the border of Brazil and Bolivia. We have thousands of turtles arriving at the same time to nest because they do everything at the same time. They communicate with each other. They're very social. So we went there and it's beyond any description. It's an incredible sight. Like I recommend if anybody has the chance to visit this place, it's an incredible spectacle. And we've been working recently with the local community and the local NGOs, helping them with the protection of the species and also trying to count the turtles using technologies like drones. So we can fly the drones over the nesting beach. We don't disturb the turtles, but we're able to have like a sight from the sky and it's easier to count them like that. We're trying to develop novel methods to monitor the population and to count the turtles over time. So it's a very exciting project that we've been doing research with colleagues from Brazil and from Bolivia. So yeah, it's a very exciting project.
Definitely. This sounds like an amazing project and an amazing experience to be able to be there on the ground and see this mass turtle nesting event happening. And I know conservation is not without challenges. You hinted at a couple of them. Even just counting the numbers of turtles that you're seeing there can be a challenge. So I love talking about the problems, the challenges, the struggles in science, because I think people don't necessarily hear about them enough. You only see the sort of end product and the success, but not all the work that came before that. So Germán, do you have a story of something you really struggled with or maybe a major failure that you experienced that you can kind of walk us through and tell us about and tell us how you got through it?
I guess every scientist eventually reaches dead ends. Failure is part of science, I guess. I say I have a couple that I remember. When I was starting my PhD, I had this idea of surveying mountains along like elevational gradients and surveying animals along gradients to see and try to understand whether climate change was forcing species to move to higher elevations, to conduct range shifts. to warmer climates. So the species in other places of the world, in North America and in Europe, long-term data was showing that animals were moving uphill. They were shifting the ranges to adapt to climate change. So I thought that was a question that was very interesting. Actually, I was kind of skeptical about that happening in the tropics. So that's why I wanted to do research on that. And I traveled from US to Colombia to do some field work. I wanted to do these transects with amphibians in Santa Marta, which is the highest coastal mountain in the world. And I came up with some data of amphibian collections and some historical records of an expedition that somebody had done an expedition along the elevational gradient of Santa Marta. So I went there and I was very excited to start surveying. But when I started arriving at the localities, I realized that the information was very imprecise. The information from the historical records would say the record of an amphibian was tied to the name of a farm. And I would go to that farm and the farm would span from, let's say, 1,000 to 2,000 meters above sea level. And I had no idea where the fur was cut 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. So when I started trying to trace back those locations, and I was there in the field by myself, and when I started realizing that I was not going to be able to trace the locations with precision, so I was not going to be able to detect whether species were migrating. It was going to be impossible because it was very low precision information. So I was very sad. I did some field work, but after a few weeks, I realized it was being fun and everything, but I was wasting my time because I was not going to be able to collect data that was going to lead me to anywhere. So I was very sad and I had to cancel that idea. But the good side of it is that a few months after I returned back to US and I started taking a class with John Turber, and I came across a paper that he wrote many years ago where he had done sampling along an elevational gradient in Peru. So I talked to him and I said, John, I have this idea. I wanted to do this with frogs in Colombia, but I had just came back from this failure expedition. And I think you have this incredible data with birds. Would you like to collaborate with me? And perhaps I can go back and resample the gradient. And he was, yes, of course. So I was able to go to Peru and finally I was able to do my transect. But it was all after this incredible failure with frogs in Colombia that I was able to change direction and move forward with this new idea.
So did the project with birds pan out in Peru?
Yes. That was one of my chapters of my PhD.
Oh, wonderful.
It was a great expedition and we had incredible results. And it was like the first research showing that birds were actually moving upslope and shifting ranges, not at the same pace as climate change, a little bit slower, perhaps following changes in vegetation. But yeah, it was a successful project at the end, thankfully.
Well, I'm glad this story has a happy ending because I know not all of them do. And I really like that you showed this flexibility, this adaptability, that you were willing to change that project once that realization really sunk in that this just wasn't going to work. You had to go back to the drawing board and try something else. And I think that is just exactly how it goes in science so often. So an important lesson to learn early on.
Yes, you have to keep thinking about it and also being humble and realizing that either some of your ideas might not work, or sometimes they're not very good ideas when you're just starting developing them. Some projects are not feasible, but other ideas are going to be feasible and are going to be good ideas, and you're going to be able to pursue them. So yeah, it's about not dwelling too much of these failures, but continuing working.
Absolutely. Well, we don't want to dwell on the failures today. Germán, I'd love to talk about your successes as well. We mentioned that this story had a happy ending. Do you have another success story in science that maybe is your all-time favorite, whether it was a big win or even a small but particularly meaningful victory?
I have several. I've been lucky to have quite a few of them. There was a recent success that had me and the team very happy, and it was because there is this region of Colombia. The Orinoco crocodile is a critically endangered crocodile that occurs only in Colombia and Venezuela. And in Colombia, the last population estimate was over like 20 years ago, and they estimated that then less than 200 crocs remain in the wild. So it's very few crocs remaining in the wild, and nobody had been back to counting them because the area where they occur, it's a very dangerous zone. You know, in Colombia, we used to have many problems regarding some areas of the country that had armed conflict. Although you do as well know that in 2016, we signed a peace agreement. The government signed a peace agreement with the armed groups, and things have improved a lot since then. So one of the consequences of that improvement was that we've been able to go and visit places where we previously could not go. So I was very interested in the crocs, and two biologists and I, with the team from WCS, we went there to this area and started working with the local people. And they told us that the population was still there. Scientists had not seen the crocs in the wild for a while. So we started navigating this river that scientists had not visited for many years because of armed conflict, and learning how to spot the crocodiles from the local people. It's very hard to see them. And we start finding crocs, and we start flying the drone and eventually realize that these are huge crocs. We captured the first footage with drones of this critically endangered species. And we were able to conduct a population estimate of the population in this river that nobody had visited for over 40 years. So we came back very happy. It was a complete success. Those stories of success, that we're happy that the crocs are still there, that we can now work in this place. We just started a project to work with the people there in order to mitigate human-crocodile conflict, to make sure that those crocs can persist there on the long term and that people are happy to have them there. So it's a very cool story because it has several components, including the fact that Colombia has improved a lot in terms of security, and we can now visit and work in many places that we previously couldn't.
Definitely. And I like that you mentioned that you're able to use drones in the research that you do. I think this is a great way to kind of get that aerial view and to be able to sample a large area. But were you also able to see the crocodiles on foot? Did you get up close at all, or was it mostly just kind of looking through the drone footage?
We could see them from the boat, especially at night.
Oh, wow.
At night, it's incredible when they start coming out, and we could see them very close to the boat. It's an area that is very low, densely populated, so there are not many boats circulating there. So they're not super shy. So at night, we could get very close to them.
That sounds wonderful, but also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, it could be to some people, yeah.
Well, it sounds like a phenomenal experience. Congratulations on this success, as you mentioned, on many different levels. This project worked wonderfully. And we've talked about some of the work that you've done that's brought you all over the world and just your academic training as well. And I think this is one of the wonderful aspects of life as a scientist is you do get to go to all of these amazing places. You have these great opportunities to travel. So, Germán, do you have a favorite place that your work has taken you?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a favorite place, but it's a place that I loved visiting, and it's Cambodia. A few years ago, we had a workshop and meeting of turtle conservationists, WCS and TSA, other organizations, and I had the chance to go to Cambodia, and it was my first time visiting Southeast Asia. And it was incredible. It was incredible because I made new friends from there. We could share experiences on how they're doing things there, and we could tell them how we're doing things here. So that exchange of experiences was really nice. It's incredible to see parallel situations, but in very different contexts. It's a completely different country, different food. People are very different from people in Latin America, but they're wonderful people. The food is incredibly good. Diversity is incredible also in Southeast Asia. So it was a wonderful experience. I think it's one of the times that I enjoyed the most traveling for research and work.
Oh, wonderful. Do you think you'll ever have the opportunity to make it back to Cambodia?
I hope so. I have many friends there now, and WCS has projects there, and it has many things going on there. So I really hope I can go back at some point, and that my Cambodian friends can also come to Colombia.
So you had mentioned the crocodile project in Colombia. Was it crocodiles again that you were working on in Cambodia, or does WCS have projects about crocodiles in this area or other regions?
Well, I was mentioning about the crocodile work here in Colombia, but in Southeast Asia, there's actually quite a few places where we work with crocs, such as Siamese crocodile. Very similar work in terms of we're trying to work to recover the population of these critically endangered species of crocodiles that are depleted in the wild. In some cases, doing head starting, like we're doing in Southeast Asia, try to head start animals and release them when they are a little bit bigger and mortality can be reduced so that we can increment the population. So we're also working with the Cuban crocodile. So there's quite a few people in WCS that are looking into crocodiles as a very important group, of course, because they're top predators. But because of this, there's a lot of human-crocodile conflict, which makes it a little bit harder to do conservation as you do with other species that perhaps do not experience this conflict with humans. But this is a very interesting group, a very important group for us as a team that we're looking forward to continuing the work with.
Fantastic. Well, you were doing amazing work with crocodiles, and you mentioned just some of the people that you've been able to work with. And I think this is absolutely a fantastic part about careers in science. You get to meet people from all over the world and work with them as collaborators, meet them at conferences. And I think there are a lot of stereotypes out there about what scientists are like and what life as a scientist is like. But I often, in these conversations with scientists, discover that these stereotypes just don't hold true. So there are so many funny, amazing, creative people in science, and you make so many wonderful memories together. Do you have a story of your own, Germán, of this human side of science, whether it's a quirky tradition or a funny memory, or just something that goes against these stereotypes that you can share with us today?
Yes, I think fieldwork is filled with funny moments. When you're in the field, so many things are not under control, and people's reaction to what happens in the field is sometimes very funny.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I remember a story when I was actually in Peru where I was telling you guys about surveying birds to understand whether birds were moving uphill as a response to climate change. We were doing surveys of birds, and we were going with a friend. He's an ornithologist, and he was looking for a particular species of curassow that only occurs in that area of Peru that we were working. And he went to that expedition mainly to look for that bird. So we were putting our nets in the forest and surveying birds. And he was doing like transects and looking for that other curassow. And one night he was not with us one afternoon, and we were taking down our nets, and we saw the bird. And we saw the bird was like there in the forest, standing on top of a log with a beam of light. And we're like, oh my God, how are we going to tell Jacob? Of course, the bird flew away, and we went back to the camp at night. It was already dark, and we were having dinner, and nobody knew how to tell him that we had seen the bird that he had been looking for like for weeks. And he was not with us at the time that the bird appeared. So I said, like, Jacob, I have to tell you something. We saw the curassow this afternoon. And he jumped from the table, and he was like, where? He didn't say anything else. Like, he said, where? And I was like, no, it was in transect number X, Y. It was like half an hour walking distance from the camp. He just threw his plate off the table, and he went into the forest, into the darkness.
Oh my gosh.
And disappeared. We tried to call him back. We knew he was not going to find the bird at night. But anyway, it was just funny to see his reaction. And he went into the forest to look for the bird. And of course, he came back like an hour later, and he didn't see the bird. But he was able to see the bird like a few days after that.
Oh, good.
But yeah, fieldwork is full of stories and funny situations.
Absolutely. I think you just can't predict what's going to happen when you're surrounded by nature. And of course, as fate would have it, he wasn't there the first time the bird made an appearance.
Yes.
Well, I think that is an amazing story. And I think it's really easy to get so absorbed, so wrapped up in your science. And we always recommend our listeners give their minds a break or expand their minds and think and read broadly. So we love giving everyone book recommendations on our show. Germán, do you have a favorite book, whether it's related to science or not, that you can share with us so we can recommend it to our listeners?
Oh, yes, definitely. I have many favorite books. I read a lot of science books, and I have several favorite books, but I would recommend two, perhaps, to the listeners. One is called The Song of the Dodo by David Quammen. It's a great book, not only for biologists and conservationists, young, early career biologists, but for everyone, because it tells the story of conservation science and the first researchers that got into it and the way they started thinking about solving the challenges of conserving biodiversity. And it tells many stories, science related, academic related, but in a very nice way. David Quammen is a great writer. So I really recommend The Song of the Dodo. And the other book that I would recommend that I love, I read it many years ago, but it's always in my mind, is The Mismeasure of Man by Stephen Jay Gould. It's a beautiful book for people who love science, but also it's a beautiful book that provides a critique to biological determinism. And it shows why all the statistics that were being used to say that some races were better than others were all wrong, and how biological determinism could be used in the wrong way. So it's a very beautiful book, and it's always very actual in terms of what it represents. So yeah, I think those two books are one of my favorite ones.
Fantastic. Well, we will add The Song of the Dodo and The Mismeasure of Man to our website for our listeners to find there. And I know we've talked about the amazing research you've been able to do, but I know oftentimes in science, as in conservation as well, you are faced with barriers and limitations, things like funding, staff, technology, feasibility. These are challenges that you just have to kind of work within those limits. So, Germán, if we took away all of the barriers and we gave you everything you could dream of in terms of these resources, what is the one question you would want to answer most?
I've had many academic questions along my career, but right now we've been very interested in the question of how can agriculture grow to provide food to people without impacting biodiversity? Or how can you minimize impact on biodiversity while developing agriculture so that people can have access to food? I think that is a pressing question today, integrating multiple sciences or multiple disciplines, landscape planning, biodiversity, ecology, agricultural sciences, soil science. It's a question that is hard to answer, but it's a much needed question because it's going to happen anyway. It's something that the humanity needs, but that we as scientists and interested in biodiversity need to provide some of the answers to guide this growth. So yeah, I think this is one of the questions that is around my mind lately that I would love to have unlimited resources and time to think about.
Oh, definitely. I think it is an enormous question, just how to feed the world while preserving the world for future generations. So a wonderful thing for me and our listeners to contemplate this afternoon. And you've shared so much with us today, Germán. I'd love to end with advice. Is there one piece of advice that you received at some point in your career that really helped you that you can pay forward and share with all of our listeners today?
Well, I think a professor once taught me to respect others' point of view, especially if they're coming from different backgrounds. And especially as scientists, sometimes we become a little arrogant, thinking that our ideas, that the way that we see the world is the only way to see the world. And my advice would be like, remember that there's other ways of seeing the world, and people from different backgrounds see the world in different ways. So it's very important to listen and respect. Give yourself the chance to hear what other people are saying and thinking, even if you think you're the best scientist in the world.
Definitely. And I think even if two people can't sort of agree on what the solution is or what the best way to do something is, just kind of hearing each other out and being open to learning about some of these other ways that people do things is critically important.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think that is wonderful advice. Is there any other last piece of advice or a last note of inspiration, Germán, that you would like to leave everyone with at the end of our conversation?
I would like just to say that science is great. It's been a great experience to me. And I think in general, science is great because it gives you the freedom to think. Thinking freely is one of the most valuable things in life for me. Nobody telling you what you have to think about. So being a scientist is about thinking about the things you want to think. And that freedom is something that is invaluable. So I'm very grateful for that.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the other wonderful benefits of careers in science is you can explore your own curiosity and think about the problems that interest you most. So definitely a wonderful note to end our conversation on. If our listeners want to learn more, Germán, about you and the work that you're doing, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yes, the best way would be through my Twitter account or through my email if they want to contact me personally, or at WCS website where people can learn about the different projects and the different places where we work.
Fantastic. Germán, what is your Twitter account, if you could spell it out for us or say it?
So it's GermanForCroc, ending with a C, like croc, ending like with croc. Germán for Croc.
I like it. Well, listeners, definitely get connected with Germán on Twitter. Check out the WCS website to learn more about the amazing work they're doing there. And Germán, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me and giving the chance to discuss these wonderful things that we discussed today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, listeners. Wonderful to have you here with us as well. We appreciate you joining us, and we hope you'll be there for our next episode of People Behind the Science.